New Zealand, our General Synod has asked us to reflect on the land we live in, Aotearoa, and the structures of our church and our constitution and so on, as part of this last Sunday before the Advent season. So, it being Aotearoa Sunday, I think I won't talk about church structures and the constitution. I'll talk about Hone Harawira. I won't talk about the man, and I won't talk about his achievements, although I have made some remarks on that which were quoted in the press this week. And I won't talk about his expletives non-deleted, though he's quite good at that. What I want to talk about is his name. His name. This is the MP for Te Taitokoro. Hone, Pani, Tamati, Waka, Neni, Harawira. Magnificent Māori name, don't you think? Magnificent. Well, the names that Māori people bear tell us something about our history, in fact, and about our church history, and particularly this man. And so I want to dwell on his names today with you. Because Māori in the early period of the 1830s and 1840s, when they came in large numbers to embrace Christianity in one way or another, and in their own way generally, were very inclusive in the way in which they operated, and particularly inclusive in the names which they chose. And so Aotearoa Sunday seems to me is a good day to reflect on how the rest of us relate to Māori today, and how much we embrace of the Māori culture in our lives and in our ways of going about doing things in this world. So we'll start with his first name, Hone. Māori loved New Testament names, and Hone is one of them, John. Other popular ones, Matthew, Paora, Paul, Anaru, Andrew, Hemi, James, Mary, Martha. Lots and lots of names that Māori people bear as their first names are New Testament names, like Hone. The second name I'm not quite so sure about. I'll have to ask him next time I see him, but it's Pani. Now, if it was a Tuturu Māori name from the old days, it would be a woman's name, because Pani is the ancient goddess of fertility. And although Tita Whai Harawira may have had something about that in mind, I don't think that he is named after the ancient goddess of fertility. I think he's named after one of the warriors of David, because Māori liked the Old Testament and used lots of Old Testament names, rather more so than we tend to in our namings. And they particularly liked the warrior chiefs who supported David. Well, that's not surprising. They're pretty warrior people, and the Ngāpuhi, who are rather more warrior people than most. And Hone Harawira comes from Ngāpuhi. So in 2 Samuel 23, if you have a look at it afterwards, you'll see a list of the names of the warriors who supported David. And one of them is Bunny the Gadite. Bunny the Gadite. Translated in the Bible in Te Reo Māori as Pani Kari. So I believe the name Pani comes from these warriors of David. And in that same chapter is the name of Abishai, the chief of the 30. Bunny was one of the 30. The chief of the 30 was Abishai. The chief of Ngāti Whātua, who invited Governor Hobson to come to New Zealand, to Auckland, Tamaki Makaurau, and set up his capital here, was a man called Te Kauwau. And when late in life he decided to be baptized, they had a discussion with his people, and his people said, "We want you to have a warrior name. You are becoming a Christian, but we know you're a great warrior, so we want you to have a warrior name." So what better name than one of the great generals of King David? So Apihai as Abishai. Apihai Te Kauwau, the great chief of Ngāti Whātua, is named after that general of King David's. And I think Hone Harawira is named after one of the other of the great 30 that fought so famously for David and helped him win the battles that he was engaged in which are recorded in rather gruesome detail in the book of Samuel. Just for some other examples of Māori choosing old-fashioned, Old Testament names which we don't normally use, Matutaira is one that you may have heard of. Some of you will be young enough to know Reverend Kingi Ihaka, the Archdeacon. His full title, the Venerable Kingi Matutaira Ihaka. Translate that, he was the Venerable King Methuselah Isaac, because Matutaira is Methuselah, and lots of Māori call themselves Matutaira. They like the name Methuselah. Maybe they like to live for a long time, perhaps, I don't know. But at any rate, Matutaira is a common name, and if you go to Māori hui around the country, and especially if you're with Whatarangi Winiata, and there's someone in the room that's called Matutaira, you can be sure that Whata Winiata will pick them out and acknowledge that one of their names is Matutaira. It's one of his favourites. So there we are. The second Māori king was called Matutaira as well, although he got a bit fed up with Western Christianity and gave himself another name a bit later on, so we mostly know him as King Tawhiao. But Matutaira was his baptismal name, and Tawhiao was another name that he took later. So Old Testament names, some of which we don't normally come across, were embraced by Māori, and especially those warrior names. Most interesting. You're converting to the new faith and you're putting away, you're giving up on slavery and you're giving up on war, but you still want to hang on to some of the symbolism of warriors for good purposes, perhaps. Then the next three names that Hone Harawira has are Tamati Waka Nene. Now, Nene, I can be pleased to tell you at last, is in fact a Māori name from the old days. Nene was the name that one of Hone's ancestors, a rangatira of Ngāpui at the time of the Treaty of Waitangi, was given as a young man. There were two who were particularly important chiefs of that part of the Ngāpui. There was Nene and there was Patuoni. They were brothers. Nene had particular influence in the Hokianga, and just down the hill from where Helen and I have our caravan in the beautiful part of Aotearoa called Pakanai near Opononi, there used to be a Methodist, or they called them a Wesleyan mission station. And Nene was baptized at that Wesleyan mission station in the Hokianga. And that was in 1839, just the year before the treaty. And the names he was baptized with were Tamati Waka. Tamati Waka. So he was called Thomas Walker. Thomas Walker was a lay patron of the Church Missionary Society, a benefactor, a philanthropist, someone who gave a lot of money to the missionary effort. And Māori like to do that too. They were very keen on honouring important people in the Pakeha world when they took on their new names as Christians. So he was Tamati Waka, Thomas Walker Nene. Also in 1839, A.N. Brown in the Waikato was baptising a few people who were young chiefs, and listen to some of the names they got. One of them became Henry Wiramu, that is, Henry Wills. Now, I hope most of you have given up smoking, but if you are smokers, you'll remember W.D. and H.O. Wills, famous Bristol Tobacco Company, later on Imperial Tobacco, great benefactors of the missionary societies, both the London Missionary Society and the Church Missionary Society. And so a young Māori chief in the Waikato gets given the name, or chooses the name. They had some choice about these things, I guess, but that's what Brown named him in his baptism, Henry Wiramu, Henry Wills. Another person baptized that same day was called Hoani Piahama. Hoani Piahama. That's Johnny Pearson. And John Pearson was the principal of the Church Missionary Society College in Islington, in London, where most of these missionaries got their training before they came out to New Zealand. So he became Johnny Pearson.